Thank you. Thank you so much. Wow. Adam, thank you so much for being here tonight. This is so kind of you to be here with us, celebrating. I mean, I'm assuming everybody else in this room is like me, that Star Trek is, I don't remember a time before it, and it sort of saved my life. So to be here for the 50th with people who really love it and love what your dad has done, such a special thing. Thank you guys for being out here as well. It's so funny, watching this movie, you went to your first Trek convention last year. And I'm sort of curious what your relationship with Trek is, you know, growing up with your dad, seeing that mail come in, seeing him everywhere. Could you ever approach Trek as its own thing? Was it until that convention that you sort of got what we get? I mean, I'm sort of curious what your relationship to Trek is.
Well, I got what you get. I mean, I was on the set when they were filming that first season. This is 2 months before they aired the show, and I'm always maintaining I'm the very first Trekkie or Trekker. I'm daring anybody to question me on that and challenge me. I love Trek, you know, I did. It was a great ride. I was a big fan of the show. I didn't really realize, in the 70s, you know, I went away to college, I didn't watch TV, and I was up in Berkeley, and just weird stuff was happening. I mean, my roommate took me to the Federation Trading Post on Telegraph Avenue, and it was all Trek. I couldn't believe it. I was amazed. And I really didn't understand what was going on in the syndication market. I kind of distanced myself from it. I had burned out on it a little bit. And I was studying with a friend of mine in a co-op on the north side. It was like student housing. And I went to make a phone call, and I came back, and he was gone. And the entire building was empty. I couldn't understand. That was a fire drill or something, you know. And I packed up all my stuff, and I was about to leave. And near the front door was the TV room, and you could see the flicker going on in there. And I opened the door, and they're all crammed in there watching Star Trek at 5 o'clock. And my friend, you know, was smiling at me, but some guy said either get in or get out. I mean, they took their Star Trek very seriously at 5 o'clock. So that's when I was becoming aware of this explosion in the syndication market. And the reason why I didn't, you know, I really didn't attend conventions. I was at my dad's final convention in 2011. But I didn't, but I didn't go, and the reason for that was I really needed to distance myself from the whole scene a little bit, because then I would be there as Leonard's son, and I don't need to see Leonard walk on the stage and 3,000 people go berserk. I mean, I can appreciate that, I understand that, but I had seen it all my life. And you know, it's like I'm still trying to create myself and my identity and who I am, and it just gets lost in all that. And I felt going back last year, because we needed film for our feature, our documentary, and I went back this year because I'm promoting the documentary, then I have a reason to be there. And it felt more like real to me, and it felt more integrated for me, and it was easier for me to celebrate being a fan.
You know, speaking of finding yourself and making yourself, you are a part of this documentary in a big way, and it's very personal, stuff about your life that's very personal. Was there ever sort of a conflict for you about sharing some of the stuff about your life, about your marriage, about your wives? I mean, was that ever a thing that you wanted to keep personal, or was that always a big thing for you to, the echo's getting, isn't it?
No, it's like, what about my wife? What about my marriage? Why are you getting so personal, Devin?
Sorry, Adam.
No, and you know, it's interesting. It's just the fact is there was a chorus of people who kept saying, you know what, you've got to include your own story. So that was easy to accept that I was going to be doing that, sharing that part of it. The issue is, how much do you tell? I mean, where do you draw the line? And this is where I really had to rely on Dave Zappone and Kai DeMello and Joe Kornbrot and our editing staff, Luke and Janice, to tell me when we had gone too far, you know, because it's not a tell-all, it is not the Enquirer, it is not reality TV, it is not, you know, air your dirty laundry. It's just, you know, it's where's the line? And I was okay with telling the story. And the other thing that I want to mention was that I was more willing to tell the story of the ups and downs of my relationship with my dad, because it ended on a good note. I mean, the last 5 years of his life, I was really close to my dad, and had we not, you know, had that bond and that love and that happy ending, I don't think I ever would have shared it, because it would have been a real bummer to talk about how difficult my life was with my dad, and then he died. You know, it's a real bummer, and it's, you know, it's sort of like Rod Roddenberry. I mean, I have a lot of empathy for Rod, because his dad died when he was in his teens, and they were having their typical teenage father-son conflict. you know, and he didn't really have the time to reconnect. So I consider myself very lucky, and that, you know, and it was inspiring that we were able to reconnect. And it resonated with people and gave other people hope in terms of reconnecting with family members where they had lost, you know, their connection, their love, their communication.
I'm going to open it up to you guys in a couple of minutes, so if you have questions, sort of get ready to raise your hand and be involved. But before I go to the audience, you did so many interviews, did so much research for this. Was there something that you learned about your dad in the process that was surprising to you?
Yeah, I mean, I knew he had a lot of impact on people's lives. It wasn't really clear to me the extent of that impact. And the thing that was kind of surprising and overwhelming and wonderful was when I interviewed the crew of the new Starship and the J.J. Abrams incarnation of Star Trek. We were in Vancouver in September, last September. They all uniformly told me that about how much inspiration they drew from my father, particularly because Dad was in these Trek films, beginning with Trek '09, and he had just a short appearance in Into Darkness. They felt a real sense of validation, that they were not just a spin-off series, they were really a part of the tradition of Star Trek, the torch was really being passed to them. And the weird thing was that even though my dad was gone, they still very much felt his spirit was with them. His energy was with them. They were inspired by him still to do the best work they could do. And it was so heartwarming for me, you know, to feel that they're really grieving him like I am, and we really are a community, we really are an extended family. To have lost somebody together, and we're processing it all together, and it was very emotional for me, and the depth of his impact was really surprising.
I mean, you mentioned sort of the grieving process. I mean, getting the opportunity to make a film about your father after you lose him, to speak to so many people who loved him, that must have been so therapeutic for you.
Well, it was, yeah. It was like really, it was lovely. You know, it's been lovely. You guys are great. I mean, it's the fans that created this whole phenomenon, and it's the fans who've been with my dad through his entire career, and it's the fans who kind of rallied around me and my family to support us, to share with us, to grieve with us, to celebrate with us. And that's what the film is to me. It's my gift to you, the fan base, to do all these things, to grieve and celebrate. Thank you. Yeah. That's the whole purpose of the film, is that we're a community, and we all love Spock, and we all love Leonard, and we should, and I wanted just to create something, a vehicle through which we could share all this, you know, the wonder and the excitement and the joy and the humor and the sadness and the tragedy of losing him.
Well, thank you for that. I cried, so I know that
good,
the
and we did our job
too, and I'm sure quite a few of you did. It's really emotional. A little less emotional. I'm curious about Leonard Nimoy's pet pad. I read about this. Did you ever? Leonard Nimoy opened a pet store here in LA. And there were some really weird animals in there. Is that true?
Yeah, there was Julie and I running the store. We were as weird as it got. You know, 2 kids running that store. That was pretty weird. The pet pad. I mean, it's so interesting that people ask me questions that are sometimes so obscure. You know, it's almost a quiz of how well do you really know Leonard Nimoy. The pet pad, yeah, the pet pad. He had a pet store. It was run by a friend of my mother's who was a fanatic for animals. She lived out in Canoga Park, and she wanted to open the store. My dad thought, you know, my dad was all about income streams. He was very, you know, he was hardworking as a kid, selling newspapers in the Boston Common, folding chairs for the Boston Pops, selling the vacuum cleaners, working in a card shop. He did all these odd jobs. And when he came to LA, it was the same thing. And when he was on Star Trek, it never ended. I mean, it was the recording career which he enjoyed, but it also generated income. And then there was this idea of doing the pet pad, you know, and then the personal appearances everywhere. And then this idea, we'll have a pet store, and it'll be a business that I'll run with this woman, and it'll generate more income, and it'll be fun for the family, right? And after a year of the insanity of running that store, I mean, it was fun, and it really was fun for a while. But then the business of it, of running a store, running a business in Canoga Park while he's doing other things, and my mother's friend was much better at you know, having a bunch of pets than running a business, and she drove my dad insane because he couldn't get from her the exact dollar figure of the receipts for the day, and her expenses and how it was amortized. I mean, my dad had an amazing mind for numbers, and she drove him nuts, and he finally just sold it to her and let her run her own business. But yeah, we had the pet pad.
I think you guys had monkeys and like gators in
We
there.
had an elephant the first day, we had raccoons, we had spider monkeys, we had this South American otter, we had a lot of exotic stuff, and then we had your regular run-of-the-mill fish tanks, which Dad knew a lot about. I don't know, it was an interesting experiment.
Anybody out there in the audience have any questions for Adam? Right there, you, sir.
How difficult and or expensive was it to get the approval and the clearance for all the clip seasons between various incarnations of Star Trek? I mean, did they put you in the poorhouse to go after all that stuff?
Can everybody hear that?
Everybody hear that? Okay. No. The question was, how expensive were the clips that we had, or how difficult was it to license all those clips, and did it put us in the poorhouse? The answer is yes. The difficulty was that Star Trek is now owned by two entities. The original series and any digital format of Star Trek is owned by CBS, and the feature films are owned by Paramount. So we were dealing with two different parties, sometimes at odds with each other. We had to license them. We had to pay them money. They gave us the family rate, and then they were very reasonable. And they supplied us with some beautiful, pristine images. I mean, the film you're seeing for the original series is pretty crisp stuff. But we did have to pay them. We had to pay a lot of third parties. And then there were a lot of third parties who gave us stuff for free because they just wanted to be participating in the project, which was great. But it was an expensive undertaking. We have a lot of film in there. We have a lot of clips. We have a half an hour. And it's like we predicted this at the beginning. We have a half an hour, 20 minutes of the original series and 10 minutes of the feature films. And then there's the music. You know, I mean, there's a lot. That's where we are still dealing with the music, because the music industry has had a tough time surviving because there's no CDs anymore, there's no LPs anymore, and they're looking. You know, the music companies are looking for ways to generate income, and one of them is by reuse fees or synchronization fees in this film. I would also mention just briefly that at the end of the film, the cover of Starman is by my boy Elroy, Jonah Nimoy, and Furiosa, his band. Thank you. I mean, you did a pretty good job. But and when Bowie died in January, Jonah played a cover of that song at one of his shows in Silver Lake, and I thought, Jesus, this is a killer version of the song. And then I looked at the lyrics, and I thought that Starman could be just as much about Mr. Spock as it is about David Bowie or Ziggy Stardust. And so we called them, and they gave us a heavy, and we thought it was going to be tens of thousands of dollars. They wanted to be involved with the film, and they discounted us. So a lot of people came on board to help us, and a lot of people were trying to gouge us, and they did.
Let's see, right over there.
I was just wondering, was there a moment that you decided that you really wanted to be, what was the moment that you decided you wanted to be a director?
What was the moment you decided you wanted to be a director?
I had an interesting experience. My father came to the Pasadena Playhouse in 1949 to take acting lessons and discovered it really was not a serious venue for his purposes. There were a lot of guys there on the GI Bill, and they were there to have their attendance taken, collect their check, and split. They were not serious about acting, so he looked around for help, and he found a class being taught by a guy named Jeff Corey. Jeff Corey was a very famous character actor in the 40s, but by the 50s he was named, and he was blacklisted, meaning that he was labeled a communist sympathizer or a communist, and he was banned from working in Hollywood. And he was teaching acting classes in order to support his family. And my father stumbled upon his class and was with Jeff for a long time. In fact, when Jeff started working again and got off the blacklist, my father took over his acting class. We don't mention that in the film. This is another way that letter generated income to keep the family floating. So around 1990, I believe it was, I was in between legal jobs, and Jeff was at a holiday party that my mother was having, and he said, why don't you come out, I'm teaching classes again, come out to Point Hume in Malibu and see what we're doing out there. So I did on a Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock, and that changed my life completely. There was about 15 people there. They were all in their mid-20s. I was in my mid-30s at the time, and it blew my mind, the work they were doing. It just, something turned inside of me, and I got goosebumps for 3 hours watching this. It was so, the work they were doing was so phenomenal. They were doing scene work and monologues, and Jeff was directing them. And that was it, frankly. I got to be honest. I mean, that's when I decided I got to get out of this, the legal biz. I mean, it was very difficult to keep a job. Everybody wants to do entertainment work in the legal biz. There's too many freaking attorneys in the state of California. There are too many attorneys in the state of California. And at that time, New York firms had got hip to California weather, and they were opening offices in California. So all these New York attorneys were coming after the weather, you know. It was just so difficult, and all for the privilege of arguing on the phone all day and pushing paper, you know, which is not that inspiring. So it was Jeff, and I stayed in that class for 2 years, never wanting to be in front of the camera. One actor in the family, folks, I gotta tell you, is plenty. We didn't need another actor in the family, but I wanted to learn about the craft of acting, and Jeff was directing actors. I wanted to be an actor's director. And then my dad thought it was brilliant that I was with Jeff, and then he started teaching me stuff. And then I was hanging out on sound stages for quite a while, learning about all this. Before I forget, Ben, are you still here? Yeah, hi Ben, I love you, man. Ben Shackman, who directed my dad in the theater, and Ben is a brilliant director. He's here tonight with us. You saw him on the screen talking about Fiddler on the Roof and Man in the Glass Booth. And thank you, Ben. Please, can we give it up for Ben? Thank you. And then as the director of Ambulate, Ben was just fabulous. Barry Newman was here earlier tonight. Barry is my dad's childhood friend, also from Vanishing Point in Petrocelli, if you guys happen to remember. We have Dominic Keating here tonight. Dominic, are you here somewhere from Enterprise? Are you here still? Are you down, Dominic? He's here. Thank you for coming tonight. Anyway, to answer your question, yeah, Jeff Corey's acting class.
What was sort of some of the advice that your dad gave you about directing?
There was a couple of things. First of all, it's story. It's all about story. You know, the fact is that good directors are good storytellers. And we've been telling stories on this planet for about 5,000 years. Since like the Epic of Gilgamesh showed up, one of the first books published on the planet. And we are simply telling stories in a visual medium. So my dad was very emphatic about trying to instill in me the idea that it all starts with story. You have to have a good idea. What is the story you're telling? What is the theme of that story? What is the lesson to be learned? What's the moral of the story? What are you saying about the human condition in that story? And from there, everything else becomes much simpler, much clearer, much easier in terms of breaking down a script, in terms of how to direct actors, in terms of where to put the camera, in terms of what kind of wardrobe, what kind of lighting, what kind of set design. All these elements of what we call mise en scène become easier and clearer if you have a very good grip on what is the forest from the trees. And the other thing that he taught me that was very important is you must find some personal connection to the story you're telling. You must find something about it that appeals to you on a gut level. And this is the brilliance of my dad and Mr. Spock, because as he says in the film, Mr. Spock is the outsider. How do you integrate yourself with the human crew? How do you give the best that you have to offer for the benefit of the many, as it were? This is my dad's whole life as an immigrant in Boston. How do I get the hell out of here and integrate myself with American society? The two were parallel, and that's why Spock was the perfect character for him at the right time. So these are the kind of things that he taught me, and I think they served me very well during the 10 years I was in the television industry.
Anybody else? Right up here?
I just want to make a comment that including your personal life in the movie gave it a lot more flavor and dimension. And I think that aspect will make it more relatable to the audience who watches this movie. And the second comment I wanted to make is my impression of Spock was through the poetry. Before I knew he was an actor, and the Middle East no less. And I think that between that and his photography and his books, there's a whole documentary that has yet to be made about that particular pursuit, exclusive of his work as an actor.
Yeah, I don't respond to all of that. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we don't even really explore in the film, like his poetry. We don't go into great depth and detail about that, but your comment about the fact that my personal story gives a whole new dimension to the film makes, really makes me feel good, because I did bear a lot of stuff. I mean, this whole situation with my late wife Martha, and I'm very close to her family still. And the fact that my dad was there to support me, and her family was there as well, but my dad, it's so it's so strange to me that this is a guy who I was estranged from for 4 or 5 years. I never would have imagined I could count on him ever again. And in, at my darkest hour, to have him there, and willing and able, this was his amends to me. This was his way of really of reconnecting with me, for trying to help me and to make up. It wasn't that his intention to make up for the years of the conflict, but it had the effect of that for me. We make amends to each other in 12-step, and this was my dad's way of making his amends. It's just a very powerful, it's an unbelievable experience for me to have, and I just felt like it resonates with some people, and I needed to share it, because it's very unique, and people are telling me it works. They feel a great sense of the personal that we went through, and it does add another dimension. And it's still very sad and painful for me, but it's also comforting. That I can share it because I had family to rely on when I needed them, and my dad was at the forefront of that.
I believe there's a young lady over here who has a question. What do you think about the cast of the new Star Trek movies? And what do you think about Zach Quinto taking over for your dad?
Zach's amazing. It's just, they're amazing. I don't think they could have, cast better people. We're dealing with other tragedy with Anton Yelchin. It's freaking horrible because he was just so wonderful and such a great presence and energy and just awesome as Pavel Chekhov. And now he's gone. It's just, we're all kind of, reeling from that still, but the cast has been phenomenal. I think they're just perfect, and they love each other, and there's the chemistry there, and Zach is a phenomenon in his own right. This is a guy who he's just got a lot of craft, and a lot of history, and a lot of soul, and the fact that my dad was very happy with Zach just being cast for whom he was in terms of his professional life. Then they had this amazing bond with one another, which is really unique. Another really strange, interesting twist to the whole saga, because, there was one time when Zach and my dad were having lunch together, and I saw them from afar, and they were really connecting, and there was a little tinge of jealousy that just kind of went, for a moment, but then it was like completely overcome by this incredible sense of warmth and generosity and good feeling and goodwill that I was experiencing of them having this connection, because it was so special and Zach was so good, and it made my father feel so satisfied and serene about this decision and just confident that they had passed the torch on to the right guy. So I love the cast. I hope they do more challenging, more character, challenged stories with the cast.
We just thank you very much for making this film, and just its impact is so very huge. I was at that beautiful temple burn at Burning Man. I'm not sure if you were. It was very moving. And in the morning, we actually get to teach kids in a theater that your father gave to the world, and that's really awesome and humbling. And we hear people all the time come up to us and say, Adam Nimoy was such a wonderful guy, and so we just felt this deep desire to say, thank you so much for your family's legacy, for all that you guys do. And so, really, that's it.
Thanks so much. You a burner? My burner?
You're a deadhead, so I see.
I'm a deadhead. I could have been a burner. I might be a little too old for that. The Burning Man phenomenon happened because my daughter had been going for the past 3 years with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend, Clayton, whom I love, my daughter, Maddie, Clayton dragged my daughter into the Nevada desert to experience Burning Man. Actually, I think, they're very responsible, and they have a really good time, and they love Burning Man. But then last year, my daughter came back and reported to me that she'd gone there and she saw this collage of her grandfather throughout his entire career. And that blew her mind. And what really blew her mind was there was that picture of me. So I was not there. And we had to collect the film, and we had to do a little movie magic to make it happen. And we had Nicholas Pike's incredible score with the Macedonian Radio Philharmonic Orchestra. And I think we put together a sequence that I'm really proud of. I think my father would be proud of, because it's storytelling visually I mean, it's the impact of those images is phenomenal. To me, I still get freaking emotional. I've seen this movie, I don't know, 30, 40 times. I want, everybody should have this cathartic, emotional cry for Leonard and Spock. That's my philosophy. It's the climax of the movie to me. And we're so lucky that we had the gift, that we found this material in a timely manner. We're so lucky. Then, having said that, some people, there was this big issue of, well, why don't we just end it on Burning Man? And it's like, there's no freaking way we're turning up the lights when men like me have tears in their eyes. Because it's like, I just don't want people to see me crying at a movie, period. And I wanted to end on a good note. So we continued on, and we added a second ending, which is this one-word summation of Dad, and I just, and that's the way, I think it's just more satisfying for me, at least as a filmmaker, and people seem to feel, thank you for giving us some relief from Burning Man and giving us an upbeat ending to this film about this incredible man and this incredible character, Mr. Spock.
All right, who has the great last question? Who's going to knock us out and really end this on the highest possible note? Somebody up there, that guy is really excited.
What would be your last word? What would be your words?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. What would be my last word? My one word about Leonard? You'll have to wait for the sequel.
Streams of income. That's you're just like your dad. Finding streams of income. They have to come back for part 2.
My one word is passion. And I say it in the film. You gotta have passion. You gotta have passion for what you do. Whatever it is, whatever your calling, you gotta find your calling, find what it is you're meant to do, find what your true love is. This is what it is passion that got my dad to get on a train at age 18 to come out to California. He had a passion for acting. It is absolutely essential that you try to find out what that is, because it will sustain you in the face of difficulties, of obstacles. At the 2012 commencement at BU, my dad was a keynote speaker at the College of Fine Arts, and he said to them, he exhorted them, saying, give us your best. Give the world the best you have to offer. We long for it. We crave it. You must. It is your duty to find your calling and give us your best. And that is a credo that I have tried to live by, that my father has lived by, and I think that is a great part of his legacy for us all to aspire to.
That was a good last question. Really well. Everybody, Adam Nimoy, Adam, thank you for sharing your movie and your father with us. So much for coming. Thank you. And thank you for support. Thank you so much.